everyone, and a massive welcome to the next episode here on InfoSec Live of the CISO Experience. For those that don't know, my name's Simon Lindstedt. I'm the host and founder of the InfoSec Live community, and I'm very excited to be talking with another of our industry's leaders, Cassio Goldschmidt, to share his journey and talk about the challenges in our industry and, of course, those important successes too. But before we begin, if you're watching this live, please do like and subscribe. We do try and make these events as interactive as possible, so make sure you drop any questions you might have in the chat. And for my failing aging eyesight, if you can mark them with a Q, I'll be able to pick them up a lot easier. And for those who don't know, who are the InfoSec Live community? We're a social network of approaching 4,000 cyber professionals, all sharing best ideas and practice, hosted on an independent community platform. And we've been producing content now on YouTube for about a year. I'm very excited to announce that we've now got over 2,250 subscribers, 5,000 hours of our content viewed. So a massive thank you to everyone in our community. This achievement also allows us to offer you new and exciting ways to support the YouTube community and, of course, the InfoSec Live community and the scholarship scheme. You've now got the ability to purchase super stickers in the YouTube chat if you want to get your question bumped up to the top, and 3 tiers of membership allowing you to show your support in any way that you can. But whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. So before we move on, a big thank you to our previous show sponsor, Brandfit Technology Labs, for supporting the first 2 series of the CISO Experience. Link to discover more about their technical consultancy services is in the video description below. But if you are interested in sponsoring this show or indeed any of our regular content here on YouTube, please do reach out to me today in the InfoSec Live community. The link to join again is also on our YouTube homepage. But today, we're joined by Cassio Goldschmidt. And before we bring him on, let's give you a bit of background. Cassio is an award-winning technology executive, advisor, mentor, speaker, and long-time contributor to the security community. He's worked for both Fortune 500 businesses and startups, where he's established a full security practice from scratch. With an MBA, a Master of Science in Software Engineering, and years of hands-on experience in different fields of information security, he develops security solutions that appeal to all business aspects, and his efforts in securing enterprises have been recognized multiple times by multiple organizations. And if I'm right in thinking this, Cassio, I saw last week that you've been nominated for yet another award, so I'm looking forward to digging into that today. But his accolades include nomination for Web Application Security Person of the Year by OWASP, winner of the Information Security Leadership Awards for All Americas by ISC Squared, nominated as one of the top CISOs in America by ISE, and appointment by his peers at CISOs Connect as one of the top 100 CISOs in the United States. He's a long-standing, devoted member of the security community with more than 2 decades of experience, and I'm very, very excited to bring him on today. So without further rambling from me, let's bring him on. Hey, Cassio.
Hey, how are you, Simon?
I'm good. I hope you like the new Stinger. It's a bit retro arcade. Remember that?
Yeah, the production is really impressive. Congratulations.
So thank you very much. It's amazing what you can do from a bedroom in Norfolk in the United Kingdom. It's
true, yeah.
But look, firstly, thank you so much for jumping in and taking the time to share with us today. This is episode 23 now of the CISO Experience. I've been honored to be joined by some amazing guests and really, really looking forward to digging in and hearing a bit more about your career. So apart from the hopefully good presentation I did for you coming in, could you give our viewers a little bit of background about how you got in the industry and a bit more about who you are as a person, Cassio, before we crack on?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
I think like most people, I started, working with computers from a very young age, right? When we had like Apple II at home and start doing things, not really playing, but really programming, right? Start doing like basic, DBase and all the database that were available at that time. Actually created a couple systems for my father's business at that time when I was like 14 or so. And when it came the time to go to college, it was really an easy decision. I was a computer guy already, right? I just had to go in and get my degree. And so I did. I think was super valuable to go that route, get the degree, made some wonderful connections during the time that I was at school. And then after that, I went for internship in Silicon Valley. Cisco invited me to come over for internship that was going to last from 3 months, maybe a year, if I did things that they really wanted, the projects they really wanted. And I think after 1 month, I was done with the project, and they came to my desk and, hey, are you done? And I go, yeah. And they go, what about documentation? Oh, it's all done. Right. And it was, really nice, because Cisco at that time was a little bit before the year 2000, was really experiencing a growth that was unprecedented in the industry, right? The
Yeah.
internet was just starting. Netscape was a big company, and routers were really the thing that everyone needed, right? Especially the big telecoms. So the company was growing, had a wonderful time working with different people. Were had the privilege of being able to work in some advanced technology, creating some patents. Later on, moved to Symantec, where I work as a software engineer in developing the enterprise solution, the enterprise antivirus for them, right? But overall, as a summary, one of the things that I always tried to do in my career was always to work with technology companies that really, their main product was software, and they live by technology. So security was really taken seriously and not as a cost center, right? Always try to get as much education as I could, which is something that I do up to date. I have, my bachelor's in computer science, a master's in computer science, an MBA, and certifications and other things that came, later in my career as well.
Okay. So what it sounds to me, don't take this the wrong way if I'm being cynical, but it sounds to me like you've chosen your battles very carefully by aligning yourself with businesses that value security, Cassio. Would I
Yeah,
be right in saying that?
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think if you really want to be valued by the business, you have to really choose the business that will look at you and say, "Hey, this is important to us, right? This might still be a cost center. This might be a little bit of insurance at the end of the day. Depends on it. Sometimes it's not a core security business,
Yeah.
but it's a key decision factor for people to adopt the software. They need to know that your information is secure with, entrusting them to, the cloud solution, to their products, and so on. And, that is really at least what moves me to, want to do the best I can for my employers.
Dare I say that for the right firms, especially SaaS providers, etc., that security becomes a sales enablement tool rather than a sales prevention tool that it can be in some industries.
Yes, absolutely. Especially if you come from a startup background, right? Bigger companies might use FUD, now fear and doubt and uncertainty,
Yeah.
as a way to say, hey, are you really going with the smaller company? Do they have everything that it takes in order to run in an enterprise environment, right? And one of those things is obviously security. And with that, it's not only security, and it's also compliance, right? And with that, there are a number of you know uh, letters that you can put together, right? And it's really easy for business people to hear and be impressed with that, but what they really mean, it's something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to make a quick comment. We normally have the chat up on the stream, everyone, so that you can see who's jumping in the chat. I've got a bit of a problem today, so I'll be honest with you. I linked up the InfoSec Live YouTube channel to the Threat Gen stream that's still going on at the moment, where they're running through a gamification platform. And for some reason, Cassio and I have got all of the chat from the other live stream coming into this one. So I am picking up comments, etc., in the chat. I can't bring them up on the stream because they're irrelevant, a lot of them, because they're coming from elsewhere. But if you do have any questions throughout this, please do drop them in the chat, because I want to try and make this as interactive and engaging as possible. So back to you then, Cassio. Thanks for that, and thanks for sharing your journey into the industry. What do you see as the biggest challenges we're facing as an industry? It's still in its infancy, I suppose. What are the big challenges coming up for us?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that InfoSec, although we have a lot of best practices, it still is a little bit of science, right? I mean, a little bit of art.
Yeah.
And I think we have to mature a little bit as an industry, right? A lot of times, for example, I hear that at the end of the day, the problem is really the users. The users are not a problem, right? I mean, they're users. They are going to
Yeah.
commit mistakes. In my opinion, obviously, we have to train them. And at Service Titan, for example, we have some really wonderful programs that we use in order to create awareness and to train our employees. But making a parallel with people driving on the road, people will commit mistakes. People
Yeah.
will get into accidents. As much as you make it hard to get a driver's license, as much as you train them on or put signs in the road, people will commit mistakes. And that's why we have things such as seat belts, ABS, and so on, in order to protect these people from when they commit these mistakes, to minimize
Yeah.
the chances of a fatality.
Absolutely. It's a great analogy, isn't it, for the security industry? I mean, the story of the seatbelt, I think the seatbelt itself was shunned for many years, wasn't it? People wouldn't wear one. I think, and car makers were actually quite reluctant to install them, if you go right back in history, for the simple reason, by installing the seatbelts, they were kind of saying that the cars weren't safe and you could get hurt. I wonder whether we can draw anything from that analogy to the cybersecurity industry, or whether that was too much of a tedious link, Cassio.
I would love, to see regulations coming, for example, with two-factor authentication, right? Most of security practitioners these days would agree that two-factor is a good thing and that everyone should be using. Cyber insurance will not provide you insurance if you don't have two-factor everywhere,
Yeah.
right? And instead, we're making laws telling, more about process that companies should follow, which is great. I mean, companies should follow sound processes, but I think we could do a little bit better job actually requesting companies to do some security controls, right?
Yeah.
Not only from industry standards such as PCI and so on, but really coming from the top.
Absolutely. And I think you rightly say, I mean, we talk about people, process, and technology, but if you look at where the industry itself is focused, it's very heavily focused on the technology part. It's also pretty heavily focused on the process part. But the people part, as you rightly said, people make mistakes, but it's educating people, isn't it? And getting them on board to what it means, to have robust security in place and how they can help with that. I think if we spent as much money as we do on shiny widgets and silver bullet solutions, on educating and informing not just our staff, but people in general. I mean, give you a good example. My wife obviously gets bored to tears with me talking to her about cybersecurity threats, etc. But the irony of it is she's now become the expert on the playground at school. So when people get a funny message through on Facebook, or they think they've had their Instagram account hacked, it's my wife they go to now. And I think the more little steps we can do like that to drive awareness to the general public who aren't in the industry, I think it will make everyone's battle in cybersecurity a lot easier. We've got a question. I'll just bring it up quickly if that's okay. Hey, Gregor, great to see you. Cassio, from your knowledge, why is it that the biggest players in cybersec are the USA and Israel? It looks like the rest of the world is hanging behind. Good point, Gregor.
That's a great question, and one that I always wonder, right? I have a lot of people in Israel, especially, that I talk on a regular basis, and they have really interesting technology coming. And I always wonder how such a small country could actually come up with a lot of things. One thing that I always notice is that they always come from a military background, right?
Yeah.
And they have some training that is unmatched with any other company when it comes to cybersecurity and technology. And although it how can I say, it really pays ransomly for the country on all the startups and just mindset of being an entrepreneur and creating things.
Yeah.
A lot of the VCs that I know these days, they actually even favor to invest in some areas such as Silicon Valley or Israel,
Yeah.
because they want to have most of the investments close to each other. It's easier for them to manage.
It,
So, one thing really brings another.
it does. And I think, with Israel, obviously defense has been forefront in their minds for a long time for obvious reasons. And I think that then relates itself into, the strength and the power they've got in the industry. And again, going back to the talent that there is, the talent pool. Critical thinking, in my opinion, is one of the most lacking skills that we have as a society, never mind as an industry. And I think when you've been brought up, whether it's in a military role or whether it's with a defense mindset, you naturally have the ability, or you've learned the ability to critically think, which again seems to stand people head and shoulders over others.
Yeah.
Um,
And execution as well, right? That's the other part that is really important. And you learn from the military is how to have the discipline in order to, make your passion really become something.
Yeah, and that's the word passion, isn't it? I think passion equals success in a lot of
Yes.
cases as well. Another comment here from Yuri. Great to see you, Yuri. Yuri's actually in Ukraine, having a very tough time at the moment. Had a great chat with Yuri earlier on in the week, who's subject to power cuts, having to go down in bomb shelters. Put it in perspective, Yuri. Very much appreciate you tuning in today for this. And the question is, how usually would you perform security awareness training to your staff? We'll cover that one first before we go on to MDR.
Yes. So, at Service Title, for example, we do training all the time. We're in front of our employees all the time. And it goes from the time that they join the company. One of the activities when they join the company that we start, especially during COVID, was a security cyberscape room, right? So basically, when people start joining remotely, what happened is there were very few activities to actually interact
Of
with
course.
one another. And one of the things that happened is actually the people responsible for the new employee orientation came to security and said, "You guys are very creative. What can we do in order to make people talk and make this exciting?" And then we came up with the cyber escape room where people start doing.
What a great
After
idea.
that, they have to do training. Our training is based on nano nano short videos, right? Like
Yeah.
5 minute videos, several 5 minutes videos, plus some training on the best practices related to the tools that we use. So, for example, how to share files securely, right? How to share them just temporarily, how to classify data, and so on, a little bit of privacy. We have a number of trainings that we provide for our employees that want to go above and beyond. Uh, uh, Software application security training is mandatory to our employees in engineering,
That's
right?
very inspiring to hear, because that certainly isn't the case with most companies you speak to.
Yeah, and we have things like capture the flags that we do for our engineers as well. In the top ones, we actually have Slack lists that we call breakers, right? And whenever we see a new feature coming up, we talk with the breakers and we say, "Hey, do you want to actually take a chance and break our own feature before it goes out?" And then we have a newsletter that comes every month out, and it's talking about the latest attempt to attack us, uh, fake profiles on LinkedIn, whatever is the topic of the month. We also address to our employees, aside from like Slack channels and so on. So we're always in constant talk with our employees, not only talking on, also about giving awards for people who do a good job, who actually let us know about things such as phishing. And one of the things that we do that I really like, and I believe we created in the industry, is something called Fish a Friend. So we invite our employees to come and write their own phishing email sent to us. And then we send all those phishing emails to our employees to see who clicks, and
Brilliant.
whoever creates the best phishing email actually gets a bonus award from us,
You see, and
right?
this is the difference to what everyone else is, or mainstream approach, which is not rewarding and celebrating people's successes. It's more, you've done that wrong, you need to improve on that. And I think I love that. I'm very excited about the reward aspect, and I love I love the cyber escape room, but the Fisher friend has got to be the best one, I think, out of all of them, and really relevant actually to today. My wife got a well. Let me give you a bit of background. So I'm selling an old laptop at the moment on Facebook
Hmm.
Marketplace. It's like a Razer gaming laptop, and we've had your usual kind of responses in you'd expect. Will you accept this? Will you accept that? And one of them was very convincing. Old lady from Scotland in the UK messaged my wife saying that she really wants it. She wants it for one of her grandsons. Can she pay? And then we post it. So obviously she first asked for my wife's bank details, which my wife was smart enough not to give her. But she said, look, if you want to make a payment to my PayPal, you can. Here's my email. Send the payment across. So I said to her, give it 10 minutes and then check your email inbox. And lo and behold, 7 minutes later, there's an email in the junk folder purporting to be from PayPal saying that you've received a payment of X amount today. But the sender, thanks to some of the phishing training that my wife's been put through with me, it was from PayPal payments at yahoo.com, I think. So that not the best attempt, but
Yeah.
again, for someone who isn't aware, it could catch you unawares, couldn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everybody receives so many messages a day, right? That sometimes you just go click, don't think a lot
Yeah,
about the repercussions, and some of them just sound very um, unassuming, and people do commit mistakes.
yeah,
It's really about what can you do in order to prevent those mistakes, the education, and also the tools you can have in place in order to if they pass the person right, how the computer can actually
absolutely.
prevent things from happening. That's one of the things about MDR.
I think just going back to something you said earlier with regards to the training, and that was around the fact that when COVID hit, you suddenly had to look at different ways, obviously, to onboard people and engage people. Also, it then means the threat landscape, the risk landscape has completely changed, hasn't it? You've got people working from home. It's no longer just work emails, phishing attempts that you've got to worry about. It's things like I mentioned a moment ago, someone selling something on Facebook, clicking on the wrong link, getting access to the company. And I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier about the importance of societal education on cybersecurity, as a whole, rather than just the focus on the business, perhaps. But going back to Yuri's question, is MDR the only solution for preventing data breaches nowadays?
Well, definitely not, right? It's don't get me wrong, it's a very important solution. I would highly recommend having a EDR or MDR installed in every single company asset. But yeah, there are solutions in to filter email. They are very modern and can help quite a bit based on APIs. There are solutions for the vulnerability management as well. They're essential in our tool set that we have. There are solutions for even when you believe that the account has already been compromised, to make sure that the bad guy cannot get to the emails that are considered confidential, right? So one of the solutions that we use, if somebody gets to, let's say, our CFO email account, in order to actually look at some emails that are flagged as confidential, they would need to have a second factor authentication done in order to open that email. Right. So there are a number of defense in depth solutions that are needed. And quite frankly, if you don't have them, the risk that you have is pretty high.
Absolutely. Let's jump into, you've obviously worked for massive organizations. At the moment, though, what we're seeing a lot of is smaller organizations suddenly realizing that they need to adopt some kind of posture on security. And there's a lot of confusion for those companies out there. And I've got to say, I do blame the vendors a little bit for this on, the narrative of pushing products to solve these problems. I think I'd argue, and I'm not an industry expert by any means, only been in the industry for less than 2 years, but I'd argue that there's lots of simple things you could do with regards to protecting your organization before you start jumping in bed with vendors and buying tools and
Yeah.
bits and pieces. And a good example of that conversation I was having with the CISO the other day was, making a replication of the AWS server with different credentials. So if you do get ransomware or your data gets held, you can carry on the business, little things like that. What would be your top tips for businesses who want to engage with security but don't want to spend $50,000, $100,000 a month on it? Cassio?
Yeah, I think awareness and above all, creating a community, a sense that everyone is responsible for security, right? Changing the culture is really key. And quite frankly, I think one of the main things that we work in the first days that I became the CISO for Service Titan was just to make sure that people understood the problem and that there was a problem and that the company was a target for attacks, even in the early stages when they were still a small startup. Because quite frankly, it's easier for an attacker to be successful with a smaller company than a bigger one, right? There's a paper that I wrote along with other CISOs with Bessemer, and it was led by Jason Chen, who used to be the CISO for Netflix.
Yeah.
We had the CISO for Datadog, Discord, myself, and we got together and determined some of the things that are essential for small yet hyper growth companies. I think that's a great start to take a look and see, some of um, the practices that we all agreed that were essential for, smaller companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And Raven, it looks like you agree with the vendor comments. Security vendors are expensive. I think they are some of the reasons why small companies can't afford it and get breached, or some of the reasons that small companies think they can't afford it. Because again, it's down to doing stuff effectively for a lower budget is possible, and you can build on that, can't you, Cassio? You can get the smaller things done to start with and then start building the program out. But when your insurance company, for a company, so give you an example, 100 million turnover, MSP manages their IT, they've never done anything about security, they sell physical products, they can't see the point, but their insurance company tells them that they now need to get a penetration test done. So this is quite a common conversation that I've had with firms over the last year. In all honesty, a penetration test is the last thing they need at this stage. Where would you start? Asset register, knowing what you've got, or what would you say to these businesses who don't want to engage but need to?
Yeah, it is a necessity, right? Ultimately, whatever you do, probably there's repercussions to your customers, right? And means downtime and downtime. If there is, for example, a data breach, right? Invariably, you're going to have things such as downtime, and that has a business cost,
Yeah.
right? So we own that to our customers. If you were doing things such as hardware, for example, it's a lot harder to patch, right? If you are in the cloud, if you're a cloud native solution, you can always deploy, updates. But my experience working with companies that actually produce hardware is that you need a far more formal type of testing and security testing in the first place in order to make sure that you're creating good products.
Absolutely. Just quickly jump off that topic for a second. I have brought the chat up now. The stream that we were linked to earlier, I think, Kerry, you were on the other stream with Jerry's. We had a bit of a problem with the comments from the other stream coming through on here. So I've only just brought them up on the screen. So if you do have any questions, please do jump in. I see that we've got a couple here. KevTech, great to see you, my friend. Thanks for tuning in. Sometimes you can just build your own cybersecurity team from scratch and train the team to learn those skills. What do you think of that, Cassio?
Yeah, I think that's great. And in fact, a lot of times I hire people from within the company, right? They had all the connections inside the company. They understood the product really well, right? And they had a genuine interest in security that I could actually observe, right? Most recently, for example, we did one acquisition, and one person from this acquisition actually was part of a tabletop exercise that we did for the subsidiary. And the person came back to me and said, can I be part of the other tabletops for all the other acquisitions so I can learn from their best practices? You look at this kind of attitude and you go, okay, that's the person that I really want to have in my team, because he can live and breathe security and incident response all day.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that we've still got some of the comments coming through from the other chats. You just have to filter them out, folks. Another one in here. Where are we? Hold on. Also forgot Raven. Here we go. Building security program is expensive as well, right, KevTech? Well, it definitely is. To get the right team. And while we've led on to that nice sort of seamless transition there, Raven, to talk about recruiting in the industry, because there's a lot of noise on LinkedIn and other social media platforms about perceived skills gaps and entry level roles not being entry level roles. What's your perception of the industry at the moment with regards to recruitment? And is there a skills gap, or is it just a perception?
There is a skill gap. The way I see is that a lot of people got into security in different ways, but what we do as a security team actually keeps changing, right? Before, network knowledge was essential, and by that I mean, configuring routers, firewalls, and so on. Suddenly, everything became virtual, right? Everything runs in the cloud. Everything becomes code, and the people who were really good at that dealing with that physical hardware didn't necessarily know how to code. These days, I think a lot of things are moving from the actual data center to the cloud and to third parties, and you need to understand how to contractually make sure that they are doing the right job. So vendor management became really important these days, right?
I mean, again, it's risk transference, isn't it, that you're looking
Exactly.
for? But
Yeah.
it's making sure that you are actually transferring the risk in the first place. And vendors are very good at shouting noise about how you can transfer the risk to them. But that brings in the importance of due diligence, doesn't it? And I think a lot of CISOs, especially those in smaller organizations, struggle with that because they just don't have the resources.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a couple of things that you can do, right? There are a number of free tools out there that can help you to actually start a program, right? When we talk about fish a friend, right? It doesn't require anything other than sending emails to your employees and, getting maybe a free account in order to do that. For penetration test or for testing, one of the things that we did in the past was we have some presence in Armenia. And we went to the university and said, hey, we're going to actually put an environment here with a copy of our software. And we want to do a capture the flag based on this copy of our software, right? And the entire event cost like $4,000 for us. There was pretty much just prizes and food for the people because it was over several hours. Easy to do. Have I been pwned? Right. Free service, virus total, free service. So there are a number of things that you can actually use out there that can help you quite a bit. There are all free. Great podcasts, newsletter. Too long didn't read. Fantastic newsletter on application security. Right. OWASP meetings, OWASP tools. Right. There are tons of really great tools that you can actually get for free.
Absolutely. If only people knew about them. They don't make enough noise, maybe, Cassio, seems to be the problem. I think having events like this and getting leaders like yourself to share their stories and insights is a big help. I mean, I've had a couple of CISOs from smaller type firms reach out over the last couple of weeks to say how helpful this has been. I think, the CISO role for some people is very new. I mean, you've been doing it a long time, but the demand in the market for good quality CISOs at the moment is massive. And it means, which takes us on to another subject, actually, which is the importance of emotional intelligence and soft skills, and how the role as a CISO, perhaps depending, again, like you said earlier, about the company you're working for. If it's a software company, you're part of sales enablement and you're part of that sales process, sometimes speaking to customers, how important that's becoming for all organizations when dealing with any third parties or indeed their clients. And I think it's a big bad world for anyone stepping into the shoes of a CISO at the moment. But what would your advice be for someone who's stepping out of a technical background into a CISO role?
Yeah, so it's another language, right? A lot of times talking to the business people, you need to understand business, right? And the more you do, the better you're going to be effective in your role. One of the things that is kind of a common theme in a lot of the hiring that I did in the past is that the vast majority of the team had some training in business administration, right? A degree or a master's degree or something like that, which is really rare. Besides the degree in computer science, for example, or solid experience in computer science, but it doesn't stop there. I think you need to understand that there's a balance in business and what you do. When there is a crisis, you need to act in a very logical manner. You have to really understand what's going on, and really lay down the plan on how to, how can I say, stop whatever is going on, right? First, and then remediate things. Tell people that yes, it is important to reestablish service, but you can only do once you know that you eradicate whatever is in your environment or whatever threat that you believe that might be there, right? So those things are really important as well to be able to communicate and lead the team when everyone is screaming, right, and get the right direction.
Absolutely. And you say about the change of language, we talk about risk a lot in cybersecurity, but when you're talking to a finance director or a CEO about risk, it's a different type of risk, right? It's a different conversation, and it all relates back to bottom line and figures, which again is another language that not all techie people have had in the past. And I think Yuri's asked, was it Yuri or was it Rayburn? Well, let's bring KevTex up first, because I think that's another good point. Taking the time to break something down in a tech way is very important. In a non-tech way is very important, especially with C-level folks. They will look at you like you have three heads if you don't know how to. I completely agree, and just reinforcing what you're saying, Cassio. But the question from Rayburn was, from hearing this conversation, do you agree that having a business-related certification like PMP or Google PM, is that beneficial to a resume?
Yes, absolutely. I think being a PMP or a PM is definitely something that is very important, because it really shows that you can accomplish complex projects. And a lot of times, what you're doing is really talking with different business units and
Yeah.
maintaining something that goes in the long term, right? So that's definitely something that is a
And I
good
think
skill to have.
no matter what role you end up in, good project management skills
Exactly.
are phenomenal, aren't they? And even if it's stakeholder engagement you're dealing with in the future, or whatever it could be, it could even be sales. I think those skills for me are a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Next question from Yuri. Excuse me. The question is, how do you think can security keys with biometric authentication change security in a better way?
I hope so.
Yeah.
So basically, I think people are bashing passwords left and right these days. And granted, there are a lot of problems with passwords, right? Especially that people reuse the same password everywhere, and sometimes passwords get leaked or they are just too simple.
Yeah.
With biometrics, you're going to see a different set of problems, right? So we're talking when we talk about passwords, you talk about exact matches. With biometrics, we talk about fuzzy matches. And I've seen cases where people were able to bypass biometric because of that, right? And at the end of the day, what comes down the wire is really not, your biometric. It's a codification of that biometric, or a sort of token that goes over, and that can also be compromised in different ways. So it really opens a different set of problems, right? Which we'll see how they are going to play
I
out in
mean,
the future.
again, Cassio, you've got to bring these keys back to social engineering concerns as well, because
Yeah.
whilst it is a code thing in the background, it only takes a different approach from malicious actors to think of a clever way to get you to tell them what the code is on your key, or that there's going to be ways around it. And I think one thing we'll find with criminals is that they've always got one way around something.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is a good solution. And I think we should definitely, it's more user friendly as well, right? So a lot of people are screaming for passwordless.
Yeah.
But we'll see, in the future, what kind of new attacks are coming up.
Yeah, it's a worrying times at the moment. I mean, there's been increased activity around the globe, I expect, because of the conflicts that Yuri's experiencing, in Ukraine with Russia at the moment. And you look at the metrics and the maps that show all the attacks going on, and it's concerning all round. And I think my biggest concern from a security point of view moving forward is infrastructure. And I say that from a very vulnerable position on an island in the North Sea, where we rely on gas from Norway undersea pipeline. We rely on our communications from the Irish Sea over to the US, and I think with events that we've seen whoever sabotaged the oil lines or whoever cut what that's happened recently. It just goes to show that we're a little bit behind when it comes to being safe as individuals, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely. And all these attacks to critical infrastructure have been a reality for a long time, right? Leon Bush from Broadcom actually showed us that when he discovered Stuxnet
Yeah.
and everything that how advanced that threat was, and all the damage it could do in a very, very large scales. These days, a lot of security experts believe that governments should be investing in buying vulnerabilities instead of building missiles, just because
Yeah.
you can do a lot more damage and get a lot more from a
Bang,
smaller
bang for
investment.
your buck. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, it's concerning. I mean, I was having this conversation. I'm doing some work with a group of colleges in the United Kingdom. So we don't have 16 plus higher education. We don't have a cybersecurity focused curriculum as such. And as a father of 6 children, my 17-year-old, he's doing the nearest thing to that at the moment, which is something called T levels or technology levels, where you get to do lots of different bits within computing, but you then maybe have a taste of security, lots of programming, bit of development. And the work we're doing with the college is to bring cybersecurity to the mainstream and make it available for school leavers and adults. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because a lot of the course is built around gamification. So I've started working for a company last week called ThreatGen that I've been doing a lot of work with over the past 6 to 9 months. And the reason I've come on board with them to help them bring their product to market a little bit more is all the things you said earlier, actually, that you do for your staff when it comes to training. And it's about rewarding, it's about engaging. And I think if we can start engaging the young people to look at security as a career rather than it being an afterthought after a computer science degree or after being a developer, I think that in itself, going back to the skills gap, which I think there is, people will say there isn't a skills gap. Well, there is, and it's all over the industry. I mean, top end CISOs, there's a skill gap, in my opinion, at the moment. There's not enough people with the experience and the skill set to do the job. And then you've got the whole middle part of the industry that's getting busier and busier. Again, we don't have the technical people with the experience there as well. So what we have got is an awful lot of people trying to break in,
Yeah.
some of whom have got the required passion, I suppose would be my requirement for it. And you mentioned the word earlier, because all the other things can be taught, but it's getting those people engaged to start with, isn't it?
Yeah, and I agree that giving a opportunity for the people to learn and be exposed to cybersecurity is important. But personally, I believe that cybersecurity is how can I say uh, comes after understanding really how an enterprise works, how
Absolutely.
code works, and other things in order to be really effective. Because if you just learn how can I say the issues that can happen, but really don't understand the underlying technology, I think you're doing yourself a disservice, right? So I would encourage people to really learn, programming or really learning about, enterprise software, how things really work in practice,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, learn about cybersecurity.
And this is where the boot camps or the training providers are kind of making the situation worse by
Yeah.
telling people, pay us your $8,000 transition
Yes.
budget or pay us $5,000 this, and we will make you a cybersecurity expert in 6 months. It just simply isn't true. And I can say that because I tried to do that myself. So I tried to become a penetration tester back in 2020 without any previous IT experience, apart from always loving computers and playing with them. And it culminated in me failing my OSCP miserably in late part of 2020. And I realized where the gap was, and it was around networking in general. Whilst I'd learned some processes and I could hack a box and I could even do a reverse shell, I had no understanding as to what that actually meant. And I think if you broaden that out to the whole cybersecurity industry, having an idea of how businesses work, what the risk landscape is for different industries, and then looking at all the different roles within cybersecurity and seeing how they gel together, only then can you then perhaps look at, well, I'd like to specialize on this area or get the knowledge for this. And again, it's either pen tester or SOC analyst is what you see advertised when we both know there's, over 50 roles in the industry that people could actually do with a lot of transferable skills from previous careers as well.
Yeah, I think ideally the way you should actually use a certification is to prove you have that level of accomplishment. And here's what I think it's the right way. One day, for example, I was at RSA and I visited the IAPP booth, right? And they had a booklet about information, what's CIPT, that's privacy technologist certification. I look at the booklet and said, gee, I know this thing. I'm going to take the certification just as a way to actually prove that I know, right? And I didn't study for the certification. Actually, the guy was really generous to give me the book, which I studied on the way back on my plane back to Los Angeles. And 1 week after I took the test and I passed, and was like, okay, I know, and here's how I can prove to the rest of the industry that I have that level of accomplishment, and not like, hey, I'm going to study for that certification to pass
exactly that
the certification, right? And that's ideally what people should be doing, just doing their jobs and then, taking the certification. Obviously, there's people who wants to change to another career. I had somebody who used to work in hospitality in the past, and the only way to actually prove that the person had the skill sets was to take a bunch of certifications, right?
Yeah.
But ideally,
certifications don't mean that you understand and can apply the knowledge, though, do they? And I think what I love about what you just said, it reminds me, I know I stand here every week saying how bad boot camps are, but I have got a little bit of a caveat to that, because there is a time and a place for those. And an example would be when I was in the financial services industry, obviously continuous professional development was a huge part of that. If you wanted to give advice on certain areas, you had to get certain qualifications. And one that I had to get was something called tax and trusts, which is as dry as it sounds. And I had a pretty good understanding of that whole area, but I paid for a 2-week boot camp to get through the exam because I hate exams and I don't particularly like sitting tests. So for me, it was building on and reaffirming the knowledge that I already had and enabling me to get the bit of paper. Whereas the way we teach at school or higher education, we don't teach to get people to understand. We teach people to pass tests.
Exactly.
And that's everything that's wrong with the world, never mind cybersecurity, Cassio, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We've got another comment in here, I think, as well. Here we go. Yuri again. Thanks again, Yuri. How do you think there will be changes to OWASP top 10 in 2023 vulnerabilities? Maybe some will change places, or will there be something new? It's a good one.
Quite frankly, the top 10 hasn't changed much in the last several years. So you always have injection attacks, cross-site scripting, LDAP injection attacks, and this kind of things, unfortunately, have still been, among the top. One thing about the top 10 is that a lot of people think, okay, this is the tool that I should actually look at my environment and try to, protect against. The OWASP top 10 is really a teaching tool, right? It's awareness tool. And that's the way it should be used. A lot of times, the way that things go to the top positions is because vendors actually are detecting those kinds of threats. And the ones that are not detected come as invisible threats. They are not mentioned there, right? So I think people should be careful when looking at the top 10 and saying, okay, those are the worst things that can happen, and have a broader view of other potential threats that might be specific to your environment or not being caught by automated tools.
Yeah, absolutely. It also brings to bear, when it comes to vulnerability management, there's been a lot of focus on CVSS scores in the past, which, dare I say, aren't terribly relevant all of the time. And also, you need to look at your organization, your business, and where those risks map to that. So blindly following Gartner reports, OWASP top 10 risks for your business, I would say is probably professional suicide, isn't it, Cassio?
Yes. Yeah. It's definitely not the only thing that you should consider, especially the Gartner reports. Things are changing so quickly. I think what is well-established products sometimes are not the best solutions out there. And, some some startups might be doing something that is far more aligned with what the way that new business work.
Oh, well, this leads us on to a really good question, actually, because
Mm.
we tend to get vendors tuning in and watching the show, even though I moan about them and complain about them every week. But you also see on LinkedIn a lot of chat from CISOs and leaders who are fed up to the back teeth of how vendors approach them on LinkedIn through, direct messaging and can I have 20 minutes of your time and tell me what your biggest concern is and all the crap, excuse my French, that they come out with. But you rightly said then you have to know and be aware of new emerging technologies, new products. How on earth do you do that throughout all the noise of, say, the vendor hall at RSAC I went to earlier on this year? How do you separate the wheat from the chaff?
Yeah, and it's a really difficult task because I mean, just like everybody else, my emails are flooded, and I feel as a human being to another, I would love to have the time to actually respond to them and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, I don't have the bandwidth," or "I'm not interested in your product," and sometimes you just have to delete and move on because otherwise I would be doing that all day long. But I tend to talk a lot with different venture capital firms. I tend to talk with a number of small companies, and because I've been in the space for a long time, I have a number of friends who either create their own companies, or they became investors in companies, or they're in the same situation that I am and looking for a solution that sometimes doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
So those are usually my sources of information and how I go after new vendors.
Again, for someone with your track record and history in the industry, you've got the connections in place to do that and the people to rely on. Not every CISO out there has got that. And let me just float this idea past you. So I was speaking to CISO called Eric Pinkerton, who's based in Australia. I had a chat with him a couple of weeks ago, and he put me on to a show that's hosted by two Australians. That's, what's it called? Snake Oil, I think, is what the show's called. But what they do is they reach out to CISOs, ask them, for recommendations on decent vendors that they work with in the past. And then they have them on the show, not to do a sales pitch, but to dig in and ask the questions that CISOs want to hear. Do you think that's worth doing?
I believe so. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's a great thing, right? There are solutions out there that really worth listening and knowing about.
yeah,
One great example that most people know these days is Wiz, right? The
yeah.
fastest growing company in SaaS company history, right? Amazing product. People are adopting left and right, and solves a great deal of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I expect with the impending recession, although I think we're in one in the UK because our previous prime minister decided to destroy our gilt market in the course of an afternoon in Parliament one day. But I think again that drives the need for people to find out and discover, what's on the market even more. And I hope it will also sort the wheat from the chaff out with regards to, the 4,000 products we've got on the market that do 10 different things that really does need to be cleared out. I think there's going to be some unhappy VCs and PEs over the next 18 months, maybe, who've invested in the wrong businesses, perhaps. But what recessions always bring is massive opportunities. And,
Yeah.
if anything, I think it could be a good thing for the industry. It could help to thin out the noise a little bit. But moving forward, I mean, look at Blockbusters as a great example of, the last time we had a recession, what rose out off the back of that, a bit of disruption and innovation from Netflix kind of turned the world on its head, didn't it? And I wonder whether something similar will happen in cybersecurity. It's exciting to see.
Yeah.
But look, sorry, Gom, you were going to say something.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that a lot of companies are either cloud native these days or moving to become cloud native, right? And use of APIs is something that is really powerful, and new solutions are using it. And the other thing is AI, right?
Yeah.
There's some incredible, actually scary things that are, going on with AI, and I think there's going to be really something that revolutionizes the security industry.
I mean, you use the word AI. If you go to any conference or any vendor hall, I mean, everyone and their wife tells you that they've got AI in their product. I'd like to beg to differ on that. I think machine learning is prevalent across
Yes.
lots of products, but there are very few who have got genuine AI. Can you give us a couple of names, or you're not allowed to do that, Cassio, on ones that are actual AI based?
No, there are no names I want to
No.
mention, but yeah, when I mention AI is really ML AI, right? And
Yeah,
all the things that, um, use machine learning and so on. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Although it seems to be the buzzword that helps people get investment, doesn't it?
I think zero trust. Zero trust,
Oh,
the one
yeah,
that,
or shift left. Don't forget.
yes.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm not an expert, and nor would I ever pretend to be, but it does seem to me that when a lot of these vendors talk about shifting left, they're SAST and DAST providers who are telling you to shift left when really you're not shifting far enough left at all, are you? You kind of just staying in the pipeline, which isn't solving anything. But
Yeah, some things such as SAST, I believe it really should be in the developer's hand.
yeah,
So they actually can run that and find things and fix as soon as they can, right? Some other things, as you said, it's overused, just like zero trust. It's not that there's no good solution there. There's some solutions that are just great for the right companies, but those are overused buzzwords, just like AI, ML, just like cloud was at a couple of years ago.
yeah, absolutely. Look, we've run over time. Any final thoughts before we go to the audience, Cassio?
Uh, I think getting into security is difficult, requires a lot of passion, requires a lot of training,
Yeah.
but it is a very dynamic type of career. I love the fact that there's always something new coming up, right? And definitely encourage people to to put the effort to do so.
Yeah. Cassio, it's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your time. It's greatly appreciated. It's been interesting watching the chat come through when half of it hasn't been ours as well. I've got to say
Uh,
that's a first for me. But I just want to say, yeah, again, thank you for giving up the time. I'm wishing you all in the US as well, for whoever's watching, a very, very happy Thanksgiving. I hope you do take the time to actually think about what you've got to be thankful for, because I think in this fast-paced world that we live in, we take things for granted a lot. And, me personally, my personal stories, an interesting one that I won't bore you with now, but the focus of what's important to me was driven home a few years ago, and taking the time out the next few days to be thankful for your family, thankful for being alive and your health, I think
yeah.
is something that we should all do. And on that positive note, Ellie, I see you in the chat. I've actually just moved our meeting that we had shortly after to tomorrow. I hope that's okay. It says that I haven't had any dinner yet, and I've got another one in 45 minutes. Not very professional mentioning that on stream, but I'm sure you won't mind moving till tomorrow. And for anyone who's watching, who's interested in sponsoring the CISO Experience, we are looking for a new sponsor. Probably won't be a vendor after the comments I've made about them today. But if you want to get exposure to the market and you want to help support the InfoSec Live community, please do reach out to me today. The community isn't there for profit. It's there to try and open the doors for people to get into cybersecurity, no matter where they've come from, and especially those who haven't got the budget to pay for these $10,000 boot camps that I love complaining about so much. So with that, I'll play you out with a little advert. Thank you all so much for your time, and see you all soon. Thank you, Cassio.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.